Sometimes a simple stop for gas can turn into a life-changing moment, one that reveals far more about a person's true character than any uniform ever could. If this story moves, you don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful real-life stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? It was late Friday afternoon when Samuel Sam Baldwin, pulled into the old Shell station off Oak Ridge Highway in Hope Mills, North Carolina. The sky was starting to dim heavy clouds, rolling in whispering promises of a late spring rain. I wasn't in uniform that day. No polished boots, no medals or rank insignias, just a plain gray polo, a pair of jeans, and my old Tuskegee University ball cap worn from years of use. I had spent the better part of the day visiting the VA Center over in Fayetteville, checking in on some of the younger vets I mentored, and was heading back toward Fort Liberty, tired but satisfied. The pump hissed as I filled up my old Dodge Charger, the rumble of distant thunder making the moment feel heavier than it should have. I was thinking about nothing more complicated than whether I had enough milk left at home when I noticed the patrol car pull into the station. At first, I didn't pay much attention. After all, it wasn't unusual to see officers swinging through for coffee or a quick fill-up. But my muscles tensed when I saw how fast he moved. Young, maybe early 30s, buzz cut sharp enough to draw blood, sunglasses still perched on his nose, even though the sun was ducking behind thick clouds. His hand hovered a little too close to his holster as he got out, then his voice cutting through the heavy air with a sharp command. "Sir, step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them." I froze, instinct kicking in before anger could find its way to my face. I raised my hand slowly, letting the pump nozzle clatter back into its cradle. "Officer," I said calmly, "is something wrong?" He didn't answer right away. He started circling my car like a wolf around wounded prey. "You match the description of someone involved in a robbery about 10 minutes ago," he said, suspicion dripping from every word. My heart thudded once hard, but outwardly, I stayed composed. "Sir," I said again, carefully, "I just left the VA center. I can show you my ID. Step away from the car now." He barked louder, this time his hand twitching just a fraction closer to his belt. A few people around the station had started to notice. A mother gathering groceries into her SUV froze mid-motion. An older man leaning against his battered pickup narrowed his eyes, arms crossed in silent judgment. I took a slow, deep breath and kept my voice steady. "I'm Major General Sam Baldwin, United States Army retired. I'm not armed. I would like to show you my military identification." His response was a curt shake of the head. "I don't care who you are." Hands visible. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about a robbery or about procedure. It was about perception, about power. And the saddest part was, it had nothing to do with who I truly was. The tension thickened around me like humidity before a storm, sticky and suffocating. I could feel every pair of eyes at the gas station glued to the scene unfolding. Their faces a mixture of curiosity, concern, and a few that flickered with silent judgment. I didn't move hastily, didn't give him any excuse to escalate. I slowly stepped away from the Charger, hands up and steady, the polished discipline of decades in the service carrying me through the surreal moment. The officer his badge read. Officer Kyle Mercer kept one hand hovering near his sidearm, the other gesturing me toward the hood of my car. I followed his commands, placing my palms flat against the warm metal, feeling the vibration of the still-running engine beneath my skin. "Turn around," he ordered, voice sharp and clipped. "Hands behind your back." I hesitated for the briefest moment, stunned that even after identifying myself, even after offering credentials that could clear the situation within seconds, this young man chose to double down on whatever assumptions he had made the moment he saw me. But I knew Hesitation would cost me more than my dignity, so I complied. The cold click of the handcuffs snapped against my wrist too tight, biting into my skin. I winced but made no sound. Across the lot, someone muttered a curse under their breath. Another pulled out a cell phone, the telltale glint of a recording lens catching my eye. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice urged me to remember who I was, to stay composed, to resist the understandable but dangerous urge to lash out. I wasn't just Sam Baldwin right now. I was every black man who had ever been misjudged, every veteran who had ever been disregarded once the uniform was gone. Mercer began patting me down roughly, his hands pressing against my sides and legs with unnecessary force. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the anger curdling in my gut. "I offered my ID. It would take you 30 seconds to confirm who I am." "You fit the description," Mercer barked without meeting my eyes, as if repeating it could justify everything. Description of what? I pressed, careful to keep my tone even, of a suspect. "Black male, gray shirt, jeans, late 30s to 50s, he said flatly. I almost laughed at the absurdity that fit half the men in Hope Mills on any given afternoon. But laughter would be mistaken for mockery, and mockery would be mistaken for resistance. So I bit my tongue until I tasted copper and said nothing. The crowd was growing now. A few more people had stopped pumping gas. A woman with a stroller stared openly. An older gentleman in a Vietnam veteran's cap shook his head in visible disgust. Whispers traveled through the humid air like fire through dry brush. "Isn't that General Baldwin?" someone said just loud enough for me to catch. "That man runs the veteran fundraisers every year. He spoke at the 4th of July parade last summer." Mercer didn't flinch. He kept one firm hand on my arm and radioed for backup. His voice clipped and official, ignoring the murmuring voices and the growing discontent around him. I caught the eyes of a young man recording nearby. He gave me a small nod, a silent message. "I see you. I'm documenting this. I'm with you." And though my body ached from the indignity, and though my pride smarted from the weight of those cuffs, I stood there tall and still, because that was all I had left in that moment. My calm, my control, my refusal to let them strip my dignity away. But even as the situation seemed poised to spiral, even as anger buzzed low and hot beneath my calm exterior, fate had already set something in motion that neither Mercer nor I could have predicted. Help, unexpected, righteous, and fierce, was about to arrive, and it would change everything in the next few minutes. Heard the familiar rumble of an old pickup truck pulling into the station, its tires crunching over the cracked asphalt. I didn't turn my head. I couldn't with my hands locked behind me, and Officer Mercer's hand still pressing firmly against my back. But I caught the shifting murmurs from the growing crowd, the way people's eyes suddenly snapped toward the newcomer. A door slammed firm, but not aggressive, and then footsteps approached with a measured, deliberate pace. "What's going on here?" a voice called out, calm but commanding. The kind of voice that demanded an answer without needing to shout. Mercer turned his head, still gripping my arm. "Step back, sir," he barked, defensive. "Already. Police matter." "I can see that," the man said evenly. "And I'm asking you, what is this about?" I couldn't see him yet, but there was something familiar about the voice, something that made my heart leap with a strange, cautious hope. Mercer squared his shoulders. "Suspect matches the description from a robbery call. Refused to comply." Before Mercer could spew more nonsense, I spoke, my head tilting slightly toward the sound. "Deputy, is that you?" There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. "General Baldwin." The footsteps quickened, and then Deputy Michael Carter stepped into view. Plain clothes but unmistakable, his badge clipped prominently to his belt. Michael Carter, one of the soldiers I had mentored years ago, back when he was just a scared young recruit trying to find his footing in Baghdad's dust-choked chaos. He wasn't scared now. He looked at me, then at Mercer, and his face hardened like stone. "This man," Carter said, voice low and deadly serious, "is Major General Samuel Baldwin, United States Army, retired. He is no suspect. He's a decorated veteran and a pillar of this community. You should have checked his ID before slapping cuffs on him like a common criminal." Mercer stiffened, still clinging to his fragile authority. "He fit the description," he repeated. But there was a crack in his voice now, a sliver of doubt worming its way through. Carter took a step closer, hands still at his sides but radiating control. "And did you confirm that description?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. "Or did you just see a black man at a gas pump and make a decision?" The crowd was silent now, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the humid air. Mercer faltered, glancing around, realizing just how many cameras were pointed at him, realizing how badly he had miscalculated. Carter moved to my side, his hand light but steady on my shoulder. "General, are you injured?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "Just tired," I replied, my voice dry. "Tired of this same old story playing out over and over again." Carter's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He turned back to Mercer, his voice cutting through the heavy stillness like a blade. "Uncuff him, now." For a second it looked like Mercer might refuse, might cling to the last threads of his authority like a drowning man clutching at air. But then he caught sight of the sea of phones, the expectant angry faces, the flashing badge on Carter's belt, and he relented. Hands shaking slightly. He fumbled with the key before he could make a mess of it. Carter reached over smoothly, plucked the key from Mercer's fingers, and undid the cuffs himself with a precision that spoke volumes. As the cold steel fell away from my wrists, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Carter gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, steady as bedrock. I straightened my spine, rolled my aching wrists, and met Mercer's gaze without a shred of fear. He looked away first. As the cuffs clattered against the ground, a ripple moved through the crowd like a collective exhale. None of them had dared release until that moment. I rotated my wrist slowly, feeling the stiff ache where the metal had bitten into my skin, but I kept my expression neutral. I had learned long ago that dignity was sometimes a heavier shield than anger. Deputy Carter stepped between Mercer and me, now positioning himself squarely in front of the younger officer without a hint of aggression, only an undeniable presence that said enough. Mercer shifted awkwardly, his hands twitching at his sides, the confidence that had carried him through this encounter leaking away like air from a punctured tire. "Officer Mercer," Carter said in a voice that could cut glass, "you owe this man an apology. Right now." Mercer hesitated, glancing around at the gathering spectators, most of whom were still recording their faces, a mixture of outrage and grim satisfaction. He swallowed visibly, but the apology never came. Instead, he muttered something under his breath, turned on his heel, and walked briskly toward his patrol car, retreating without grace or accountability. I didn't chase him with words I didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than any apology he could have offered. Carter turned to me, his voice softening. "General Baldwin, I'm going to request a watch commander to come to the scene. He gestured to the charged space around us. "This isn't going away quietly." I gave a small nod of agreement, my jaw tight. "I appreciate it, Deputy, but let's do it right. No shouting matches. No scenes." Carter's mouth twitched the ghost of a smile. "Understood. Sir, calm and precise, just like you taught us." He pulled out his phone and placed a call, speaking quickly but professionally. Meanwhile, the crowd began to murmur louder conversations overlapping in a growing tide of disbelief and frustration. "That man is a hero," someone muttered behind me. "Serve 3 tours for God's sake." Another added. I caught snippets of it but kept my gaze steady, my focus on breathing through the tightness in my chest. It wasn't the handcuffs that had stung the most. It was the reminder that after all these years, all the service, all the sacrifices, none of it armored me against a stranger's snap judgment. 10 minutes later, a black SUV with government plates pulled into the station. Out stepped Lieutenant Vanessa Rollins, a woman in her late 40s, moving with the clipped authority of someone used to cleaning up messes, bigger than the ones her officers wanted to admit. Carter moved to meet her, halfway, explaining briefly and handing over the floor without unnecessary dramatics. Rollins approached me directly, her gaze level, her voice firm but respectful. "Sir, I'm Lieutenant Rollins. I want to apologize on behalf of the Hope Mills Police Department for what happened here today." I inclined my head slightly but said nothing, my silence heavier than any words. She didn't flinch. "We'll be conducting an immediate internal review. Deputy Carter here has already submitted preliminary witness statements. We'd like to request yours as well if you're willing." I considered it for a moment, then nodded once. "I'll cooperate fully. I have nothing to hide." Rollins exhaled, some of the tightness leaving her shoulders. "Thank you, General. We'll make this right." Whether she could or not wasn't my concern anymore. The truth was already out there, recorded, witnessed, undeniable. As Rollins and Carter coordinated quietly in the background, I stood beneath the soft gray sky, the scent of rain thickening in the air, and understood with painful clarity this wasn't just about me. This was about every man and woman who had ever been judged at first glance. Their whole story reduced to a single ignorant assumption. Today, at least, the truth had found a way to be heard. I watched as Lieutenant Rollins and Deputy Carter finalized their notes, professional but visibly simmering with frustration beneath their calm exteriors. It didn't take long for the inevitable to happen. A local reporter, tipped off by someone in the crowd, arrived at the station minutes after the watch commander. She didn't approach me directly at first. Instead, she spoke with a few bystanders, gathered shaky cell phone footage that was already circling the internet like wildfire. I didn't need to ask what was happening. I could feel it, the hum of something larger unfolding, something beyond my small corner of the world. Word had gotten out, and it wasn't staying local. By the time I pulled into my driveway that evening, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts from old friends I hadn't heard from in years, calls from former colleagues, even a message from an old commanding officer who now worked at the Pentagon. All of them had seen the footage. All of them wanted to know if I was all right. I assured them I was fine, though inside I still carried the heavy weight of humiliation I couldn't quite shake. I didn't turn on the television that night, but I didn't have to. My neighbors knew. The next morning, as I walked out to retrieve the paper, Mrs. Jameson from 2 houses down, who rarely said more than a polite hello, crossed the street, pressed a hot cup of coffee into my hand, and murmured, "We saw what happened. You didn't deserve that. Thank you for how you handled it." I simply nodded, humbled and strangely exhausted by all the sudden attention. Across town, the story was already spiraling into national news. Footage of me standing calmly, hands cuffed behind my back, face composed under the weight of injustice, was playing on every major channel. Commentators debated police protocol, community leaders gave interviews about racial profiling, and veterans groups issued public statements demanding an apology and accountability. Meanwhile, someone had dug deeper into Officer Mercer's record. Skeletons tumbled out fast. A previous excessive force complaint in another jurisdiction, a recommendation for retraining that had gone conveniently ignored. The Hope Mills Police Department, blindsided by the blowback, scrambled to issue statements of regret and promises of a full and fair investigation, but the damage was already done. People had seen the footage. They had made up their minds. Civil rights organizations weighed in, calling for Mercer's suspension and systemic reforms. Petitions popped up online, gathering thousands of signatures within hours. Veterans associations across the country began to rally behind me, not because I had sought their attention, but because they recognized a fellow soldier standing silently against an old familiar wrong. As for me, I stayed silent. I didn't need to add my voice to the roar. The truth was out there now, recorded in shaky video and unwavering witness testimonies. And sometimes silence speaks louder than anger ever could. I continued my daily routines, visiting the VA center, checking on my community projects, sharing quiet meals with friends who didn't treat me like a symbol, but simply as Sampi. Still, a part of me knew this wasn't over. The world had seen the moment, but the real battle, the slow grinding work of change, was just beginning. And while I hadn't asked to be a part of it, I understood now that I had a role to play whether I liked it or not. Injustice once illuminated demands a response, and dignity once threatened demands to be reclaimed. As the days passed and the storm swelled around me, I stood firm, not because I sought attention, but because I knew one simple truth. The strength we show in moments of trial is not just for ourselves, it's for everyone who comes after us. The storm that had started with a few camera phones and quiet murmurs quickly turned into something far bigger, something no local police department could contain. Within days of the incident, the Hope Mills Police Department announced that Officer Mercer had been placed on administrative leave without pay, pending the outcome of an internal investigation. But the community was no longer satisfied with empty promises and bureaucratic reviews. Pressure came from all sides: veterans groups, civil rights organizations, local churches, even members of the town council, each demanding not just an apology, but real tangible accountability. It wasn't just the video of me standing quietly in handcuffs that fueled the outrage. It was the realization that this wasn't an isolated mistake. When Mercer's prior record surfaced, the narrative shifted from a misunderstanding to a clear pattern of misconduct that had been overlooked too many times. And for once, the town wasn't willing to look the other way. Meanwhile, Deputy Carter became an unexpected symbol of integrity. Reporters sought him out for interviews. Community leaders praised his actions, and within days, invitations began pouring in for him to speak at leadership forums and police reform panels. He declined, most of them preferring to stay focused on his work, but quietly, he began attending internal police workshops, speaking to new recruits about what courage really looks like when you're wearing the badge. As for me, I stayed away from the microphones and cameras. I continued my quiet routines, morning walks through my neighborhood, volunteering at the VA center, mentoring young ROTC students who were trying to find their own paths. I didn't want the story to be about me standing in a parking lot with handcuffs on my wrists. I wanted it to be about the broader truth that moment had revealed. Still, the calls came, emails from journalists, interview requests from national news outlets, invitations to speak at rallies and forums. I declined them all. I wasn't interested in becoming a figurehead or a political pawn. I simply wanted people to see the reality that judgment without understanding authority, without humility, leads to injustice every time. Then came the news that the district attorney's office had opened a formal inquiry into the incident. It wasn't just about departmental discipline anymore, it was about legal consequences. Officer Mercer was now under investigation for false imprisonment, unlawful detention, and potential civil rights violations. The announcement hit the media like a thunderclap, reigniting national attention. Civil rights attorneys from across the state offered their support, and advocacy groups organized rallies outside the courthouse, demanding justice not just for me, but for the countless others whose stories had never been caught on camera. When Mercer was formally charged and booked, the image of him being led into the courthouse, head bowed, hands cuffed loosely in front of him, circulated almost as widely as the original video. But I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about acknowledgement. It was about forcing the system to admit what it had allowed to happen in broad daylight under the pretense of law and order. Through it all, Deputy Carter remained a steady presence. He checked in with me from time to time, sometimes bringing coffee, sometimes just sitting in quiet conversation. Neither of us needed to say much. We understood each other in the way that only men who have seen the world at its worst can understand. Change was coming slowly, painfully, but it was coming. And if standing tall in a gas station parking lot with cuffs on my wrists had helped even a little to push that change forward, then I could live with the bruises it left behind. The days that followed were a blur of headlines, statements, and endless debates. But for me, life settled back into its familiar, steady rhythm. I refused to let that one moment at the gas station define who I was or steal the peace I had worked so long to build. I continued visiting the VA center, continued mentoring young cadets who still believed that honor and integrity mattered more than anything stitched onto a uniform. I spoke once quietly at a small gathering at the community center, a private event, no cameras, no reporters, just veterans, students, and a handful of families who wanted to hear the truth from the man they had seen on their screens. I told them I wasn't interested in being anyone's hero. I told them that standing still, being calm, demanding dignity without rage, that wasn't weakness. That was strength. Not because it changed hearts immediately, but because it held a mirror up to them. If they looked honestly, they'd see it wasn't just about me. It was about every moment when judgment overtakes fairness, when fear trumps understanding. Across town, Deputy Carter had quietly accepted an invitation to speak at a new police training initiative focused on de-escalation and bias recognition. No fanfare, no press releases. He showed up every week talking to rookie officers about what it meant to truly serve a community. Not rule it. Some listened, some rolled their eyes, but a few just enough took it to heart. Meanwhile, Mercer remained suspended awaiting trial. His union mounted a tepid defense, but the evidence was too clear, too public, too undeniable. I didn't celebrate when I heard that the DA was pushing forward with charges. There was no joy in seeing a man brought low by his own actions. Accountability wasn't vengeance, it was necessity. A reminder that wearing a badge demands more than authority. It demands wisdom. One afternoon, a young ROTC cadet approached me after a mentoring session, his voice hesitant but full of determination. "General Baldwin," he said, "how do you stay calm when someone's already decided who they think you are?" I looked at him for a long moment, seeing in his face the same mixture of fire and uncertainty I had once carried myself. "You remember," I said quietly, "that their assumptions don't change your truth. You stay rooted in who you are. Let them carry the weight of their ignorance, not you." He nodded, and I saw the understanding settle into his posture, into the way he squared his shoulders just a little more firmly. That was the real victory. Not the headlines, not the court cases, but that shift, that awakening in one young mind at a time. The national news eventually moved on as it always does. New scandals, new crises took center stage. But around here, the memory lingered. Conversations were different. People looked just a little longer before speaking, weighed their assumptions just a little more carefully. Change hadn't come all at once. It never does. But it had begun. And sometimes that's all you can hope for, that a moment born of injustice can plant seeds of awareness strong enough to outlast the noise. As for me, I didn't seek the spotlight then, and I don't seek it now. I walk my neighborhood streets. I visit the kids at the center. I share coffee with old friends who see me not as a symbol, but simply as Sam Baldwin. A man who served, who stood, and who stayed true even when it would have been easier to crumble. Because in the end, dignity isn't something someone else can take from you. It's something you carry quietly and steadily through every storm, knowing that it was never theirs to touch in the first place. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently, Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful true stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. Let's keep these important conversations going.